Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Newsgram. We begin today's show with a quote. It is curious how experience molds our actions, reactions, and expectations of what is to come. Those are not only the words in the description of what has become a trilogy of books for Peter Massam, but they are the perfect beginning to this podcast because they explain exactly why it exists in the first place. Not the podcast, the books. I'm not trying to confuse you. I just think that as you learn more about Peter Massam and how he thinks, you're going to be better able to appreciate the wonderful books that he's written.
One of my soapbox topics has been customer experience.
Yeah, that is also one of mine. How many times have you been frustrated by a product and said to yourself, did nobody test this out? I mean, how did it even get to this point?
Ever since I picked up one of the first mobile phones, tried to use it and said to my colleagues, how on earth do people put up with this? Because it was terrible performance, probably 2 calls survived out of 10. And made it my sort of life's work to try and capture that experience and make it better for people.
We need more people who think like Peter. Now, I'm old enough to have been there when the first mobile phones were rolled out. We still call them cell phones for a reason. They were very cool to have, but they didn't work that well. A lot of dropped calls.
That was the general theme of my career. Towards the end of it, as we got into more of customer perception and the softer side of things, I realised that the industry really wasn't ready for getting their arms around that. It would be much easier for a psychologist to have got their arms around it.
Well, the amount of dropped calls has come down significantly, so thank you, Peter. So, what drives a former teacher turned businessman frustrated with dropped calls to pursue a trilogy about a young man growing up?
That's where these trilogy came out of. From one side was, how do you get inside the mind of your customer? And then the second motivation for that was very much a personal one, because we all, during my teaching career, I came across a sixth form boy who committed suicide with everything in front of him. And my immediate reaction to that was, well, that is such a waste of talent that I've got to try and do something to help those people, especially among young men who I think a larger percentage choose that route, to try and allay their fears, because life is full of fears, full of unknowns, and if you have no tools to cope with them, or you're living in a deprived circumstance, then you probably feel that there's no resort except the last one.
Peter Massam is the author of 3 books, Nipper, Moose Conquering Fear, and Know Your Mind. And as you can hear, he is a very caring individual. It's his empathy that I found most intriguing. It seems he has succeeded in being able to see inside the mind of his customer.
I would certainly like young adults, young boys, teenagers to read Nipper, because that will prepare them for what may come down the line.
When it comes to growing up, there is quite a bit that comes down the line later, and his book takes you into all of that in a fun way. It starts out with a couple of kids squirting water bottles off a bridge at moving cars. It's typical slice of life boy stuff like riding bikes and fishing, as well as the pain that comes when a friend moves away. But it's told in such an interesting way that you'll find yourself smiling throughout most of the chapters. Nipper is the first book in the trilogy, and this is where you get to first meet George. Growing up in a loving family, but not a wealthy one, and all the growing pains that go along with that, including the love between a boy and his dog.
Having been a teacher and seen boys develop, we all develop at different speeds. And myself, I was a late developer, definitely. The message there is it shouldn't matter, because your time will come. And it doesn't matter whether it comes at the end of the school days. And for me, as I explained in the book, it came a bit too late. But then you just push on from that into the rest of your career. And for me, it was sport, and it can take off at any time, and you should be ready for it when it does, because you'll enjoy it so much more.
Most of us were not prepared for the arrival of puberty and all the strong emotions that go with it, many of which you've never experienced before.
When you are noticed, I suppose, by the opposite sex for the first time, that is quite disconcerting, because you know how to react to a friend who is a male friend if they're joking around with you, but when it comes to more serious feelings, then you are unprepared.
Another part of life is the evolution that takes place in the workforce, getting your first job and navigating the intricacies of that particular type of employment.
As you're evolving, you're looking for common ground with other people. And there are definitely, in your life, there are definitely people who are too far removed from where you are, your situation, because either in age or in experience or something else. So you're always looking for that person to talk with. Some would call it a kindred spirit, but I think that's probably going too far. It's just somebody that empathizes with you enough to understand what you're going through, and you can talk openly with them. And that's what happens with George and Joan.
You'll learn all about Joan when you read the book. But as you can see, we've taken you through George's life from a young boy to a young adult. And to use one of Peter's analogies, navigating that sea without a map, as George found out, can be a teenage squall or a fulfilling voyage of discovery. And this brings us in a very natural way to book number 2, Moose Conquering Fear. Growing pains, now a thing of the past, and we are moving on to being a grown-up.
Going from one situation to another and coping.
That is a great way to summarize adult life. It seems we are always doing just that. It's one thing after another. And if we have the right coping skills to take and deal with whatever life throws at us, we usually manage to do just fine.
It doesn't pause or ponder over things for too long. That was deliberate. If I just tangentially mention that the books, I was very conscious of making them briefer than a novel, because I wanted young people to feel, and others to feel, that they could pick the books up and read them maybe on a couple of train journeys. So they had to be engaging and not, it was not meant to be an analysis. It was meant to be, this can happen to you too. And if it does, then, this is how one person dealt with it.
It's all about learning that transitioning through different stages in life can be hard. You have to deal with just being human, moving out of your boyhood home, getting a job, dealing with the fear of failure in that job, and getting married, which comes with its own share of challenges.
You can find that sometimes life throws everything at you, and in the same day.
Ever had one of those days? Yeah, we all have. In the second book in the series, George is confronted with some adult decisions. He has to confront his fears, make some hard decisions, and if you fail to learn from your mistakes as a grown-up, you may need to make the tough call.
New parents in particular, and new couples, full of hope after their marriage, probably, and are looking for their first house. If you find yourself in an area, as George did, with very expensive properties all around, and being a teacher, only being paid a teacher's salary, that was just not on the cards. So money was tight, as it had been for George's parents, as recorded in Nipper, and therefore you have to find a way around things, and you look at all avenues to try and ease that burden.
So George thought one way to ease the burden was to take on a side job, selling insurance. Now, I tried this once, and let me tell you, it's not a side job.
But as it turned out, it didn't actually work out for him, and sometimes things don't. It's really, again, how you try and cope with those challenges, and in a practical way. I like to think that this book will be useful to people, to give them the tools to be able to work through that situation and not be afraid to reach out to those who they may not see very often.
There are a lot of contacts in your phone and business cards in your desk, so just because you don't talk to those people all the time doesn't mean that they don't want to hear from you. It's just a call. Don't overthink it. Life can be a real roller coaster sometimes, but in his series of books, Peter tries to smooth out some of the bumps and remove some of the unknowns to help alleviate fear. They're all written from the male perspective, as the main character is George. And while there is no right or wrong way, he points out that some calls are just immensely hard to make. So having the right support can help you set aside doubt and take that leap of faith. Now, ordinarily, this is where I would remind you that these books are now available to purchase, but that's not going to happen today.
I'm not here so that people buy the book. I'm not really. I would rather have all the libraries, and it's on Gardner's list now, and the wholesalers who the libraries rely on, and there are 2 other entities as well who have access to it. So I'm working the libraries quite hard at the moment to get them into their hands, so that people who cannot afford to buy a book, it's a luxury, can still have access to it.
Amazing. Well, if you have the means to purchase the book, then there are links in the show's description. Or, better yet, when was the last time you visited the library? Why not stop in, see if it's on the shelf, and if not, talk to the head librarian. Tell them Peter Massam sent you, author of the Learning Experience Trilogy, including Nipper, Moose Conquering Fear, and Know Your Mind, which we will explore in the next edition of Newsgram from webtalkradio.com.